How's everyone doing? My name isn't important, but we have released a video last week that was talking about what scripture says happens when you die. A few people watched that video and they were confused. They said, "But what happens for those people who have seen their dead loved ones who have come back and revealed things to them and even saved them on occasions? Where is that in scripture?" Which makes a good point. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what the scriptures calls familiar spirits. And for those who don't know, uh, you will be finding out in a little bit. So the first place we're going to go is Leviticus chapter 20, verse 1 through 8 says, "And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Say to the children of Israel, any man of the children of Israel, or the strangers who sojourn in Israel, who gives any of his offspring to Molech, shall certainly be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. And I shall set my face against that man, and shall cut him off from the midst of his people, because he has given his offspring to Molech, so as to defile my set apart place and to profane my set apart name. And if the people of the land at all hide their eyes from the man, as he gives any of his offspring to Molech, and they do not kill him, then I shall set my face against that man and against his clan, and shall cut him off, and all who go whoring after him, even go whoring after Molech from the midst of their people. And the being who turns to mediums and to spiritists to go whoring after them, I shall set my face against that being, and cut him off from the midst of his people. And you shall set apart yourselves, for I am Yahweh." But we're going to keep going though, because they mentioned medium and spiritists, by the way. So from there, Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 10. "Let no one be found among you who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire," known as Molech worship, by the way, "or one who practices divination, or a user of magic, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead," also known as necromancy. "For whoever does these are an abomination to Yahweh, and because of these abominations, Yahweh your Elohim drives them out before you." Let's keep going though. In that same chapter, verse 14 says, "For these nations whom you are possessing do listen to those using magic and diviners. But as for you, Yahweh your Elohim has appointed such for you." That was in Deuteronomy. Let us go to Galatians chapter 5. Verse 19 says, "And the works of the flesh are well known, which are adultery, whoring, uncleanliness, indecency, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, quarrels, jealousies, fits of rage, selfish ambitions, dissensions, factions, envy, murders, drunkenness, wild parties, and the like." People often skip over a couple of these things, but I want to focus on sorcery, because here it is being mentioned again. And if you're not clear on what sorcery is, the last chapter we just read gave you a very, very good detail on what's considered sorcery. Diviners, necromancy, anything that would require you trying to contact another realm, any spirits, wherever they may be, is an abomination. But why? This is where we get into familiar spirits. Also, let us go to 1 Samuel chapter 28, verse 3. It says, King Saul, put away those that had familiar spirits and the wizards out of the land. That's in 1 Samuel 28, chapter 3, verse 3, I'm sorry. So from here, we're going to break down what exactly was going on. So familiar spirits, if you've watched the shows like Salem and any of these other occultic shows, you often hear the term familiar spirits. They're familiar because you're not familiar with them, but they're familiar with you. Mind you, these beings, these watchers, in Hebrew called Natsarim, they're watchers. They don't have bodies. They don't inhabit flesh. They need vessels. But they live. They see you from your birth to your dying day. They know everything about you. It's nothing for them to warp themselves, into whatever it is you have your heart fixated on. So if you have a lost of loved one and then you sought to contact them, they can easily look, smell, talk, walk, everything, just like whomever you're trying to contact. And typically how it starts is they may send you a little message. That starts you from calling psychics now, because you want to contact the dead. You want to contact your loved ones. Then from the psychics, you move on to tarot cards. And then from the tarot cards, you find yourself having a full seance with pentagrams and even the Ouija board in your house with people trying to contact this so-called loved one of yours. What happens is when you do things like that, you are a vessel and you open yourself up. These beings cannot willingly control you. You have to allow them. They know that you wouldn't allow them if you knew what they were, so they deceive you. The message of deception. They deceive you, and then you open yourself up as a vessel, and bow, they have you. And it may take years to show the fact that you may be on some type of possession, but they do it. And this is how. And this is why we're told not to do it, because we are now the living temples. The body that we live in now is to be served and used as a living sacrifice for Yahweh. While we are living, you can't do anything for him when you're dead. So every day that you live needs to be a day that from the moment you wake up, I need to serve my creator. How can I do so? Because when you're dead, game is over. Rap, it's fun, it's finito. But more about these familiar spirits. They're not for you. They're not for us. They don't work for us. They're not your guardian angel. That's not little Johnny or little Timmy. They're deceptive spirits, and they're familiar because they're familiar with your lifestyle. Last thing, birthdays, because the familiar spirits ties into the birthdays. The 3 places in scripture that talks about birthdays, and no, December 25th isn't one of them. The first one is in Genesis 40, dealing with Joseph and the beheading of, I think it was the baker or the butler, one of those two, don't quote me, but that's in Genesis 40. The other one is in Job 1 through chapter 1, verse 4, 5, 13, and also 18 to 19. And then the last one is in Matthew, where the who was it, Herod, who had John beheaded on the birthday of his daughter-in-law, I believe it was. Here's the thing about that. On all of these birthday occasions, and all 3 of them, death followed, from the beheading of the butler to the house falling in on Job's kids to the beheading of John. So birthdays in scriptures don't really insinuate anything good. The reason why you don't find that our Hebrews did practices of birthdays is because it's also paganistic and related to the Luciferian doctrine. What the pagans would do is they believe that when you were born, you had what we now know as a guardian angel, what they called a Juno if you were a girl, or a genie if you were a boy, and that these beings, these spiritists or whatever you want to call them, were there to protect you, guide you, instruct you as you grew up. On your birthday, that was your day to consult them. You would have your cake, you would put your candles in there, and then you would make a wish, and then you blow out the candle, and then in the smoke, your jinn would appear and reveal you your fortune or your god, which was a deity that they worship back there, also known as a guardian angel. This is a thing that many think comes from the Greeks, but it's also Babylonian, who they get it from. Nowhere in scriptures, because any angel works for Yahweh, not you. And so this is why we don't celebrate birthdays. It's also Luciferian in its practice, and it's a form of divination and sorcery. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just also want to interject something right quick. I find this interesting. Reading from the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia by Bromiley on page 515, as this to say, Josephus refers to Titus' celebration of his brothers' and fathers' birthdays by slaughtering Jewish captives. Now, by the time of the New Testament, Genesia could be used to designate the birthday celebration of a living prominent person. Hence what we see going on in Matthew 14:6 and 6:21. When Herod celebrated his birthday, he was acting in accordance with Hellenistic custom, and there is no evidence for the celebration of birthdays in Israel in pre-Hellenistic times. Now, among the early Greeks, it was the birthday of the gods that was being celebrated, and no common folk had their own birthday. It was for kings and emperors. So only in recent times have people everywhere from all walks of life, poor and rich, started to celebrate their birthdays.